We're going to take a look at the top wide receivers and air yards from the last 3 weeks. Wide receivers who have produced 80 air yards per game from weeks 8 to 10. We're going to take a look at. We're going to look at some of the ancillary jabronis, and we're going to be looking at some of those wide receivers who've just been going nuclear because we want to talk some ball. We want to talk some numbers. We also got a tight end in there, which is very interesting as well. So we got to look at these wide receivers, see if there's any trends, see whether or not you want to pick them up off waivers, trade for them, trade them away while the value's hot, and whatever else you want to do with them. We're going to look at the numbers. You decide what you want to do, but we're going to look at these values, look at these players. But what you need to do right now, tap that subscribe button. Tap it with the finger on your phone. Tap it with your mouse on your computer, whatever you need to do to get the job done. We analyze the trends. We analyze the waiver wire, hot and heavy. We look at those roster stashes and lottery tickets. We help you set your lineups. We help you win those trades. Ric Flair's watching you. Anderson Silva's watching you. Don't disappoint them. Hit that button. Stop missing out. I'll be here next year too, so you won't miss out in 2024 either. So let's dig in. Let's look at the trends here from the last 3 weeks. Wide receivers who are getting 80 or more air yards per game. Some of these guys aren't scoring much, and some of them are scoring a lot. But we're going to be looking at some of these guys. Christian Watson, in his last 3 games, has produced 289 air yards, got 17 targets and a 16.7% target share. And then looking at the production in his last 3 games, there hasn't been much. He's been banged up. He's been off and on. These wide receivers in this offense, they take turns. They take turns being productive. Jaden Reed has been hitting lately. Romeo Doubs has been hitting. We have a 3-headed monster here at the wide receiver position for the Packers. We also have Love at quarterback, so take that what you will. But he's seeing 96.3 air yards per game with an okay target share at 16.7%. I'd be loving it if it was around 20 to 22. But still, a 17 ADOT is good for a guy who's got this type of speed and range to him at 6'4". And if you're looking at him on your roster, or if you're looking at him for a trade right before the trade deadline in your fantasy league, you know you're getting a wide receiver who's getting deep targets, who could provide splash weeks. He's banged up quite a lot. He's banged up with a different injury this week with the shoulder and chest, something to monitor. But still, deep ball city with Christian Watson. Devante Adams. So if you're scared off because of the rookie quarterback and some of the numbers we've seen, especially in week 8 where he scored 2.1 fantasy points, week 9, 7.4, but he came around last week with 14.6, wide receiver 2-ish to 3-ish numbers there. But the workload is tremendous. 27 targets, 38.6% target share. So that's elite. That's big time. 390 air yards, 130 per game, 14.4 ADOT. So he's getting big time workload here. He's getting a lot of opportunities. That's going to hit down the line. Things are going to connect. And I get it. The acuity of targets are not the same. They're not as accurate. They're not as tremendous. But that workload is still something to hang your hat on. And if you got some time before the trade deadline, or if it's soon, maybe you can buy low on him, considering he scored, 24 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks, so he hasn't really done much. And maybe you can catch a reactionary manager on the market right now, catch a 38.6% target share on the cheap, and catch a ton of air yards on the cheap as well, 130 per game. That's what we're looking at here, and he's getting volume for days, and that's what we want from our wide receivers. DJ Moore, working with Tyler Badgett here in his last 3 games, seeing 20 targets and a 21.1% target share. So the volume's not super heavy, but the air yards is there. It's increasing a bit. A 12.3 average depth of target. With Justin Fields, it was below 10. 245 air yards in the last 3 games. 81.7% air yards per game. Nothing crazy, but the air yards have increased over these last few weeks. And then looking at the scoring here, 9.5 PPR fantasy points, 5.4, 10.9. So that's like a wide receiver 3-ish week, somewhere in that range. So looking at the workload here, it's okay. It's not grandiose. The target share, 21%. It's okay. It's okay. The air yards is just enough. But he's probably cheap if you need a cheap trade target right now. We know he's going to be volatile. We know he's going to be up and down. We know he had those upside games. Justin Fields is coming back. But the air yards is there. The targets are there. And he can get you yak on any given play. DJ Moore, the trends are saying monitor him. Watch him. See what he's going to do. Terry McLaurin. Terry McLovin over here. Howe loves him. He's the only wide receiver in his offense that's somewhat consistent. Last 3 games, 27 targets, 19.7% target share, which is pretty good in his offense considering Howe just spreads the ball around. In some matchups, the box score is like this at the wide receiver spot. 257 air yards, 85.7 air yards per game, and a 9.5 average depth of target. Scoring lately has been okay. 17.3 fantasy points against the Eagles in Week 8. 12.3 against the Patriots in Week 9. 7.3 in Week 10 against Seattle. So we're coming off a down game. He's been fairly steady. We're not getting any super boom weeks, but he's also just getting good volume. And we're seeing this week in and week out. We might have a down game sprinkled here and there because that's just normal in the Commanders' offense. But still, when we look at Terry McLaurin, we're seeing a steady wide receiver who's being productive, who you can count on in your offense to get you by. Deontay Johnson's been seeing some volume since he's been back. In his last 3 games, 27 targets and a 29.7% target share. So an elite target share right now, 30% is elite, and he's pretty much there. 330 air yards per game, 110 air yards per game. 100 air yards or more is pretty elite there. Pretty top tier when you're looking at volume there, especially when it's stretched out over 3 games or more. 7.1 ADOT. So a lot of this is per volume. A lot of this is not many deep targets because the ADOT's not that high. But the production is there. 16.5 fantasy points against Jacksonville in Week 8. 22 against Tennessee in Week 9. Green Bay just 2.7, but still, he's getting production. He's getting workload. He's running a lot of routes. He's getting a lot of deep targets. 27 targets in his last 3 games and a lot of air yards to go with that. He's been a silent hitter here in fantasy football. A guy I don't hear many people talk about. I mean, he's been hurt a lot throughout his career, and I can understand that. But when he's on the field, he does some things. DeAndre Hopkins in his last 3 games have been very impactful, and this is the Will Levis era, and that's why. 25 targets during his time, almost a 25% target share. But the air yards is what matters here. 446 air yards, 148.7 air yards per game. That is elite. That is an elite total there. 17.8 average depth of target. Will Levis slings YOLO balls. Will Levis is rejuvenating Hopkins right now. Will Levis is doing this. This is a good pair, especially for fantasy football, and I love the deep targets here to the veteran wide receiver. 150 air yards per game is nasty, especially for a team like the Titans, especially for a rookie quarterback, especially for DeAndre Hopkins, and you love seeing it. He's going to give you a splash game here and there because of it, because he's getting those Will Fuller air yards, baby, and that's what you want to see. Tank Dell has been nasty ever since he came back from that concussion. He was nasty earlier in the season. He had back-to-back 20-point weeks earlier, but he's really hitting full stride here. Last 3 games, 29 targets, 28.7% target share. So we're pushing elite status here. 425 air yards and 141.7 air yards per game. 141.7 air yards per game. Elite. That's awesome. That's amazing. That's huge. That means you're going to be productive. That means you're at least going to be a splash play. And he's that. 14.7 average depth of target. 14.7 average depth of target. So he's more than just a slot receiver. You can have him go deep. You can have him beat him deep. You can sling it downfield to him. You can put him on the outside. Have him win with nuance. Have him get downfield. Win with some ball skills there. Because he is a very cerebral route runner who can create space. Get him downfield. He can stretch it. Create separation, and you can really flood him with volume. CJ Stroud doesn't care. He doesn't care. He'll throw it to anybody that has a pulse on the field. He'll get it to them, and they'll catch it somehow. That's how that's working. Tank Dell's a benefactor of that. CJ Stroud wanted Dell, and we're seeing why. Dell has been amazing these last few weeks. Should see him have a strong end to his rookie season. Noah Brown has been coming on too, Dell's teammate. These last few weeks, his last 3 games, 19 targets, 18.8% target share. So we're pushing to a good target share here. 257 air yards, 85.7 air yards per game, 13.5 ADOT. So we're getting deep targets. We're getting some volume. Again, CJ Stroud doesn't care. Noah Brown is running routes in this offense, which means he has the opportunity to go boom on any given week. You should have your ears perked up to Noah Brown for the rest of the season as a what-the-heck play in your roster. TJ Hawkinson, last 3 games, 36 targets, 35.6% target share. Super elite for a tight end. Big-time numbers here for a tight end and workload. 296 air yards, 98.7 per game. That's due to the volume of the targets. We have Dobbs in there at quarterback over like the last few games as well. And he's still getting some volume here. He's been a heavy hitter. And we got to point out those numbers. This is good confirmation bias if you have him on your roster. If you need to sell high to build up the rest of your lineup, maybe I don't suggest that. I would not do that. I think I look at this as more confirmation bias that you have a good tight end on your roster and you're going to soak it up as long as you can. That's what I would do, especially in redraft. CeeDee Lamb. This is going to be more confirmation bias here because these numbers are just insane. And I really want to just go jabroni with this whole presentation. But these numbers stick out like a sore thumb. His last 3 games, 44 targets, 36.1% target share, 535 air yards. That's like half a season of air yards for some wide receivers. 178.3 air yards per game. That's not just elite. That's insane. That is nuts. And that's on a 12.2 ADOT because we're getting a lot of volume and we're getting some deep targets. Well, look at the fantasy production here. Week 8, 41 points. Week 9, 28. Week 10, 39.5. He's been going crazy these last 3 weeks, and he is being spammed to death in the passing game. Maybe they should just spam him to death for the rest of his career because it's paying some dividends here. They're getting some production out of him, and that's nuts to see. For fantasy, his upside and his value will never get any higher than this unless he does this for a 4th or 5th game. That being said, if you need a bag, a couple good players, a handful of players, now might be the time. Get you a running back and a wide receiver. See if that can happen. More than likely, you're just enjoying the production. You're enjoying this confirmation bias that I'm raining down on top of you. You're enjoying these numbers. It's going to be hard to get a deal done with a wide receiver who's producing this high. But if you can sell on the high, and you need to sell on the high to really build the rest of your team to get through the playoffs or even compete to get to it, maybe this is the time. Maybe you need to do something big here. But CeeDee Lamb also could be a huge hold because he is a pillar to your fantasy team. This is big time numbers. This is elite. This is historic. But those are the trends from the air yards from the last 3 weeks. Week 8 to week 10. Wide receivers averaging 80 air yards or more per game. And we're just looking at the trends. There are a few more, but they're the usual suspects. We have some usual suspects in here, but some of their numbers kind of got a story behind it, so I got to talk about it. I'm really talking about these numbers for you to make a decision with these players, whether it's just confirmation bias, you're buying, you're selling, you're watching, whatever you need to do, but they're there for you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the way out. Don't forget Ric Flair's watching you right there. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.